Welcome back to my Sokovia toy box. Today I'm going to show you how to set up the logic for the final boss battle with Ultron. This is something I had to design myself because the boss battle spawner does not include Ultron. And this toy box and this series needs a climactic finish. As you probably saw in the playthrough of this toy box back in episode 21, this battle consists of two repeating stages, okay? The first stage spawns a wave of tough enemies here at the entrance to battle, and 6 armored orbs, and you must destroy all 6 orbs in order to weaken Ultron and move to the second stage of the battle. And in the second stage, you've got 10 seconds to hit as many of these rail targets as you can, and they're randomly lit up. You have to hit a total of 10 targets to destroy Ultron, and if the 10 seconds expires before you have a chance to do that, the battle resets and stage 1 starts again, although you'll have fewer targets to hit when you get back to stage 2. So this is the cycle that the boss battle goes in. And this will probably be one of my longer episodes for this series because there's a lot here that we need to set up. But let's start just by finishing the build exercise in here. And there's just a few little blocks that we need to put down that I forgot to do during the build. So let's take care of that first. So we're going to start with this little terrain cube here. And if your terrain down here is oriented the same as mine, you can kind of use the texture there to determine where to put this. But we're going to style this with Flynn's World. I'll set that to be the theme. And we're going to put 3 of them along this wall. And this one we're actually going to slide back here like that. And another one over here like that. Okay. And then flipping it around and going over to the other side, we're going to do the same thing basically. Right there. And right there. And right there. So the front edge of this is lined up with that. And you've got basically 2 blocks. 1, 2, and 3 over. And then 2.5 to that one, and 3 to that one. So that's how I've got them spaced out. Those are the pedestals that the orbs are going to sit on. Alright, and we're going to need some large block walls, 2 of them for the entrance. So, just to make this easy, bring this around and we'll put 1 here. Let's go ahead and style it first. And I want to style this so that it kind of looks like a closed grate. The Geonosis Droid Factory floor grate works pretty good for that. So we'll use that. And we're going to need 2 of these in order to seal off the entrance, because I don't want the player coming into this hidden area behind here until the end of the thing. So we're going to use these doors to close this area off. And let's go ahead and slide these over. It'll make it a little bit easier to place the paths. And you'll notice I'm not putting them directly up against the terrain block, just to make it a little easier to select them. This isn't where these are going to sit. Ultimately, they're going to sit up here, but that's what we need. Alright, and then we'll go up to the Creativitoys. We need the Path Creator. We need to center this over top of this panel. And we're going to bring this back to about here. And now if we go 1, 2, 3, that's halfway over the width of the door that we're going to be putting in. We'll do 1, 2, 3, and then a 4th one. So a total of 7 spaces over, and I'll exit. That's where that path point goes. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So we want to center this over the door. If we put that in the right spot, it should be 1, 2, 3 to the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4. And exit. So those will be the paths on which the doors will move. And on the properties for each of these, everything stays the same, but auto start objects gets turned off. Properties, auto start objects. Okay, and then we just connect the doors. And I'm going to actually do that at the end because it's going to make this a lot easier to get in and out of here if if we can see what we're doing. Because I've got all the creativitoys for this battle set up out here. And that's why we're going to do that at the end. Hopefully I'll remember. You guys remind me when we get to the end of the video. Okay. We have... Let's go ahead and review the creativitoys that we've got. So I have 3 locators placed over here. And don't worry too much about where those are placed. This is basically centered in the chamber. And it's along the front edge of that terrain cube over here. And this one is set back a little bit. And again, you can look at the texture on the floor. Notice which way the blue dot is facing on those. These are going to be for the special effects around Ultron. And then directly over top of this, we have a rail target point and another rail target point. And then this one is set back a little bit off to the side from that middle one at the same level, and so is that one. And if you're not quite sure where that is, wait till I put Ultron in here and I'll show you again. And then we have 5 locators here at the entrance with the blue dot facing in. This is where the enemies will spawn. This one's centered. And the exact placement of these doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure they're out away from these paths a little bit, but not too far into the room. And we have 2 replayers. We have one for Ultron because we're going to have to destroy him. So this will be used to put him down. This one will be used to put down the armored orbs. We have 2 effect generators. I have a enemy wave generator with a logic gate. We have another logic gate over here, a collectible tracker, and a time delayer. And these are grouped for a reason, as you'll see when we go through this. We have a logic gate here with a time delayer, a counter, and another time delayer, and a logic gate and a randomizer. Alright, so that's pretty much all of the toys we're going to need, except ones we're going to reuse, like the action enforcer and sound effects and level starter and so on. Okay, let's start with the replayers. So on the properties for each of these, we're going to take the playback interval to 0. And we'll start with the one for Ultron. So let me come out of the editor so I can step on the replayer and get the menu in the lower right corner. On my Wii U, I press B to start recording, which is the one on the bottom. And then I step off so I can get back in the editor. And we're going to go down to the Set Pieces drawer. And we're going to be using... reset the drawer on me. Bummer. We're going to be using the Ultron core. This is from the Marvel Battlegrounds playset. If you don't have that playset, I do not know what to recommend for you. You can use whatever you want, I guess. But we're going to place this in here, centered in the chamber, right up against that back wall. And this is why we made the chamber 4 blocks high instead of 3 blocks high during the build, is so Ultron can sit in here. So we'll drop him in. And you'll notice now where those rail target points are sitting. So if you want, you can put Ultron in here first. Make sure you stop recording before you put the rail target points in. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll step on the replayer. I press B again to stop recording. And you can see where those rail target points are. They're right up in front of them. And a point where they're visible. Okay. And then we step on the replayer. And I'm going to go ahead and clear it. And all the little sound effects for Ultron still play in the background, which is a bummer. But that's a bug, I guess. Alright, replayer number 2. We'll step on that. I'll press B to start recording, and we step off. For this, we're going to go to the gameplay toys. And we're going to use the blue armored orb. And we're going to put one on top of each of these pedestals. So right there. Right there. You can hear Ultron going, even though he's not in here. Once you save the toy box and reload it, that will go away. That sound. Alright, so there are our orbs. So then we'll step on the replayer again, press B to stop recording, and A to clear. Alright, so we have that set up now. I did a little bit of other setup work ahead of time. The first effects generator here is connected to the middle locator back here. The other effect generator, which is going to be for the explosion at the end, is connected to all 3 of those locators under Ultron. And I've already connected this up to the other 5 locators there at the entrance. And I've set the wave to be 5 shielded BX droids. Alright, and that's all I've done so far. So now you're caught up with where I am. Okay. Now the mission is going to begin when the church mission up here is finished, and that is keyed off of this enemy wave generator that we looked at before. This will connect to this logic gate, which will do the mission success. So off of this logic gate is where we're going to start the next mission for the boss battle. And this logic gate needs to do several things. Alright, so on this logic gate, we're going to do a new logic connection. On output, first thing we want to do is come down to our replayer for Ultron and do a playback. And that will put Ultron into the toy box. The replayer is really good here because we can take him out when we destroy him. We can also take him out until we need him, which will save some memory because those set pieces take up a lot of memory. So that's really good. It's a win-win for the logic and for memory management, so that's really nice. On this logic gate, new logic connection on output. The next thing we want to do is come down to the 2 path creators and do a playback, or a reset and play. And that will open the door to that chamber. New logic connection on output. If I can select it, reset and play. Okay. And once we connect those doors, they'll slide into the wall out of sight. Alright. Next thing we will do, new logic connection on output from that logic gate. we're going to come down to our enemy wave generator and put the first wave of enemies in here. So we're going to generate that wave. And then, let's see. That puts that in there. We did that. Okay. And then the last thing we want to do is put the orbs in. So a new logic connection on output. We'll do a playback on that replayer to put those armored orbs in there. And that sets us up for the boss battle. And I'm just double checking to make sure, excuse me, that it's all in there. And I think I got it all. Okay. So the first stage of this boss battle is going to be controlled through this logic gate. Okay, so every time we start stage 1, except the first time here, we're going to come through this logic gate. This is going to be logic gate number 1. This is the one that I put here closest to that area, just so I remember that that's number 1. Okay, and the collectible tracker is going to keep track of when we destroy those orbs. So on the collectible tracker, under the collectible type, we want the blue armored orb. That's the collectible we're keeping track of. And we don't need to show these on the radar. I think that's fine, because they're all right here in this chamber. And the fact that the enemies are in here, they're going to show up on the player's radar, and that'll kind of guide them down here. So they'll get here without needing to put these on the radar, and then once they're in here they can see all of those, so they don't need help finding them. Okay. So the collectible tracker is going to be driving the end of stage 1. So on the collectible tracker, we're going to do a new logic connection when the final collectible is collected. So they destroy the final armored orb. There's a few things we need to do here. First thing we're going to do is come over to this time delayer and start the delay. This is going to take the orbs out and reset them, essentially. So on the properties for this time delayer, we're going to set this to half a second. So I'm going to set it to, 0.5. There we go. And then on this time delayer, a new logic connection. When that delay is completed, we'll come over to our replayer for the orbs and do a clear. That will take them out. Saves a little memory, and when we play back that replayer again later, that resets the orbs for the next round. But we'll get to that point when we get there. So the first thing we do when we finish collecting the collectibles is we take them out. The next thing we do on the collectible tracker, new logic connection. When the final collectible is collected, we're going to come over to, let's see here. I'm trying to keep track of what I've got here. We need another time delayer. I forgot a time delayer. Hang on a second. So let me pick that one up and put it down, and we'll set another one over here. And let's put this one out over here. I think, just double checking my notes here. Sorry about this. I have to make sure. Yes. Okay, we'll put this here. Alright, so on the collectible tracker, new logic connection. When the final collectible is collected, we're going to come over and start this time delayer. And we're going to set the time on this to be 10 seconds. This is going to be for the length of phase 2, or stage 2 of the battle. So the player has 10 seconds to hit as many of those rail targets as they can. And so this time delayer will drive the end of stage 2 when we get there. Okay, I'm going to take this one step at a time. Okay, so that clears the orbs and starts off the time delayer for stage 2. The next thing we need to do is start putting in rail targets, and I want these to show up randomly. So we're going to have all of these hidden initially, and then we're going to have one show up in a random position. So the player's not going to be able to just sit there and camp on one of those rail targets and just pound away at it. It's going to jump around, basically, is what it looks like. And if you saw the playthrough, that's what you see. So what we need to do is come up to our level starter, and we want to hide all of those initially. And I would recommend that you do all of this logic in one setting, one session if you can. If you can't, you want to save this stage to the very end. All right? Don't hook up the level starter until the end. Excuse me, if you're not going to do this all at once. But since I am, I'm going to do this because I want you to see the flow here. So on the level starter on Catalyze, we're going to come down here to each of these rail targets and turn them off, which will hide them. So new logic connection on Catalyze. And it's important because these don't show up until stage 2 of the battle. So when the player gets down here and they're starting with stage 1, we don't want those rail targets there and have them just start shooting the rail targets. So new logic connection on Catalyze. There we go. And one more. New logic connection on Catalyze, and we'll hide the last one. So all of these targets will be initially invisible. That's what the off signal means. Let's see where we're at. There we are. Which means when we start stage 2, we want to start showing rail targets, and we're going to show them one at a time. And as I said, we're going to do that randomly, which is why we have our randomizer out here. So at the end of stage 1, on the collectible tracker, we're going to do a new logic connection. When the final collectible is collected, we're going to come directly to our randomizer and show the first one. Okay? And we also want to let the player know they've reached stage 2, and we're going to do that with a sound effect. So let's do on the collectible tracker, new logic connection. When the final collectible is collected, we'll come up to the sound effect generator. And under here, we are going to, let's see, go to the general category, and we're going to go down to the power down sound. So it kind of sounds like you've taken a force field down that might be protecting. Oop, power down just went past it. There we go. That may have been protecting Ultron. Okay. Alright, and then the other thing we're going to do, new logic connection, when the final collectible is collected, we want to come over here and open this logic gate. This is logic gate number 3. So this is logic gate number 1, this will be logic gate number 2, and logic gate number 3, and I'll tell you what this is for when we get there, okay? But just to make sure we have all of our connections here. Okay, so the end of stage 1, they've shot the last armored orb. We take the collectibles out, we start the time delayer for stage 2, We go to the randomizer, and now this is going to put in a random target. So on here, we're going to do a new logic connection for a random trigger 1. Come over to this rail target and turn it on. For random trigger 2, we'll turn that one on. New logic connection for random trigger 3. We'll turn the next one on. And then for random trigger 4, we'll turn the last one on. So 4 trigger signals, 4 rail slides. When you invoke the randomizer, it'll pick one of them. There we go. Okay. So there we are. Stage 2 is started, and the first rail target, one of those is turned on. Yeah. Okay, so each one of these rail targets is going to do the exact same thing. So to make it easy for ourselves to hook this up, this is why we have logic gate number 2. Okay? So each of those rail targets, we're going to connect it to this guy. And that'll help so we don't have to make so many logic connections here. So on the first rail target point, when it's hit, we're going to input into logic gate number 2. And when this one is hit, we'll input into that same gate. Oops, I had it. New logic connection when hit. We'll input into that gate. And for the last target, you guessed it. Oops. New logic connection when hit. Gee, let me think. We'll input into the gate. Alright, so it doesn't matter which one they hit, it's going to come into this gate. And on output from here, we're going to do 3 things. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is a new logic connection from this gate. On output, we want to increment the counter by 1. This is going to keep track of the number of hits on Ultron. So on the properties for the counter, I'm going to set the target count to be 10. Visible display, we'll leave that on. The rest of these are all fine. Okay, so that's going to keep track of that. So once we've got all 10, this will drive the end of the mission. Next thing we want to do on this logic gate, a new logic connection on output. We're going to come over to our time delayer over here and start the delay. And what we're going to do, because I don't know which rail target invoked this thing, we want to turn them all back off. And so that's what this time delayer is going to do. So on this, we're going to do a 0.25 for the time. Smallest we can set it. And when you shoot the rail target, it will automatically disappear, but it will reappear after a second, and I don't want to do that. I only want to show one that I randomly pick, which may be a different one. So that's why we're using this to turn them all back off. So a new logic connection on this time delayer. When this delay is completed, we're going to come back here and turn all of these back off, just to make sure it doesn't reappear. Whichever one we hit, we do not want it to reappear. That's the purpose of this. Because again, it will do that automatically, and I don't want it to do that automatically. I only want to show one randomly that I pick. New logic connection when the delay is completed. Turn the next one off. New logic connection when the delay is completed. Turn off the last one. Oop, went past it. Okay, so that'll make sure it does not come back on automatically. Alright, so when a rail target's hit, we make sure they all are turned off. We increment the counter. And then the other thing we want to do is randomly show the next one. And we want to give it a moment before the next one pops up. That's why we're using another time delayer here. So a new logic connection on output from this gate. We're going to come over to this time delayer and start that delay. Oops. And we're going to set the properties on that to half a second. So 0.5. And these time delayers that are in here just space things out a little bit so events aren't happening right on top of each other, in case you're curious. Alright, so a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we're going to go through this logic gate before we go to the randomizer. So we're going to input new logic connection on output. We go to the randomizer and select action. And the reason we're going through this is we're hitting rail targets, and eventually the 10-second timer over here is going to end. And I've run into cases where you hit the rail target right a split second before that 10 seconds ends. And so the rail target hit comes through here. It kicks off this time delayer, which, if it went directly to this, would automatically turn on one of those rail targets. And so that's why we have the logic gate in here and why we're closing it here in a moment, just at the end of this, when this time delayer goes off, so that if this one goes off after that one goes off, we make sure we don't invoke the randomizer. So that's really what the purpose of this gate is. Having that as a pass-through allows us to turn that off so we don't run into that little bit of case. And again, that doesn't happen very often, but it happened often enough that I decided I needed to have this gate sitting between this time delayer and this action enforcer. So hopefully you understand what the purpose of that gate is. A lot of experimentation went into this to figure this out. So anyway, okay, so they're hitting targets. They come through here. We're incrementing the counter. We're selecting a new one, and at the end of the 10 seconds, this goes off. And if they have not hit 10 targets yet, as recorded by the counter, then we want to exit stage 2 and go back to stage 1 and start the next stage of the boss battle over again. And so that's what this time delayer does. This is our 10-second timer marking the end of stage 2. So on this time delayer, we're going to do a number of things. Alright. New logic connection. When the delay is completed, we're going to come over to our first effects generator, and I want to give the player a visual cue to let them know that force field is back up. They're looking at Ultron, they're aiming for targets, so this will give them a visible effect. And the effect that we're going to do, we're going to play one time out of the electrical effects drawer, the radical energy impact. That just looks like a burst of energy from below Ultron. And we're also going to play a sound at the end of that 10 seconds. So on that time delayer, a new logic connection when the delay is completed. We're going to go up to our sound effect generator. We want to let them know with an audible cue that the force field is back up. And for this one, we go under General. And the best thing I found under here that I liked was the computer bleeping blooping. There really wasn't a good power-up sound. Okay. So on the time delayer for the end of stage 2, new logic connection. When that delay is completed, we want to come over and close this logic gate. And again, it gets opened from here. So the collectible tracker, we made that connection earlier, going to that logic gate. When the final collectible is collected, that's when it gets reopened. So at the start of stage 2, that reopens. And at the end of stage 2, this time delayer here closes it again. Alright, on that time delayer, new logic connection. When the delay is completed, let's see, where do we go next? We're going to go invoke this time delayer, the one that turns off all of those rail targets. I could have this go directly to each rail target and turn it off, but we've already hooked up all 4 of them to this, and it's just a very quarter-second delay, so it just makes sense to do that and save a little bit of logic connections. So I like that. And then the other thing we're going to do, because we need to reset for stage 1, we're going to do a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we're going to come back here to logic gate number 1 and input. And this will drive the initialization for stage 1. So on output from this logic gate, there's 2 things we want to do. First thing we want to do is a playback on the orbs and put them back in. The next thing we're going to do from this logic gate is a new logic connection on output. We want to reset the collectible tracker. And then we also need to generate a new wave of enemies, and we're actually going to do that off of here. Sorry about that. One more thing at the end of stage 2, and I'm doing it off of this. Why was I doing it off of this? Oh, because I'm going to end up going through another logic gate over there. So we're going to do a new logic connection on that 10-second time delayer. When the delay is completed, we'll do an input on here, new logic connection on output. We'll create the next enemy wave. And again, we're going through a logic gate so that we can close this when the battle is over, so that if this timer goes off at that point, we don't respawn new enemies. Okay, so this is just doing 2 things. It's resetting the collectible tracker and putting the orbs back in. And that's what that does. Alright, and I'm just reviewing my notes to make sure I've got everything. And I'm looking at these just to make sure I didn't forget anything, and I think I got it all. Okay. Alright, so stage 1 will start again. They'll have new enemies. They'll be shooting orbs, and then the final collectible will be collected. This will kick off another stage 2, and away we go. And this whole cycle ends. It'll repeat stage 1 and 2, stage 1 and 2, stage 1 and 2, until they finally get 10 hits on Ultron. 10 of those targets get hit. And once they do, the mission is over. So the counter here drives the end of the mission. So the first thing we're going to do is a new logic connection when the target count is reached. We'll turn off all of the rail targets, and again we'll use the same time delayer to do that. That's the one connected up to all 4 of those to hide them. New logic connection when the target is reached. We are going to make sure we close this logic gate. New logic connection when the target is reached. And again, we're closing that gate so we don't get any new targets. That was the bug that I ran into, by the way, in the playthrough video. After the mission was over, we had a target show up because that replayer was kicked off. Next thing we want to do is go up to our action enforcer. Have all of the players celebrate. And on the counter, new logic connection when the target is reached. We'll play our standard end of mission musical flourish. So under the musical category, musical fanfare, and we could do fanfare, or we could do royal fanfare. Maybe we want to do that because that's the big boss battle that we completely finished. On the counter, new logic connection when the target is reached. We want to come over to our second effects generator over here, and we are going to play once out of the explosions category. The huge explosion. And then on the counter, new logic connection when the target is reached. We will clear the replayer for Ultron, which will take him out, and the explosion will cover that. So that's really good. And then we want to do a new logic connection when the target is reached. We want to make sure this gate is closed so we cannot restart stage 1. And that's important because once this time delayer over here goes off, it's going to attempt to restart stage 1. And so closing that gate makes sure that it doesn't happen. Also, a new logic connection when the target is reached. We're going to close this gate so that no more enemies will spawn. And I think that is everything for the logic. I'm just double checking. I know we got to hook those doors up yet, but just making sure all of these things were set. We set the properties on stuff as we went along. Oh, the enemy wave generator properties. Generation delay, we take that to 0, and the rest of those things are fine. Team, we want to make sure we set this to be the purple team, because otherwise these enemies are going to go nuts down there because they cannot reach the canister that's up here in the old church. So make sure you put those on the purple team, or weird things can happen. And those are already connected to all those locators. Okay, with that, I believe we have everything. Just need to hook up these doors. So on the door, we'll do a new path connection. Connect that to the toy box path. And then we need to set the properties on this. And all of the properties are fine, except we need to change the movement style to one-way and stop. And we do the same thing with this door. New logic connection, or new path connection rather. Toy box path. Properties. One way and stop. And there we go. So if the player happens to fly down here before the boss battle starts, they can't get in. So I don't want them toying around in there. And this also helps them, prevents them from seeing the fact that the orbs and Ultron are not here initially. And even if they were, we wouldn't want the player to go in there and start shooting them and doing stuff. So there we go. That's all the logic for that. And let me just double check here one last time, make sure I've got everything. I know this was kind of a longer video today, so I appreciate your patience, but I want to make sure I got everything for you. So that's the logic for the boss battle, and next time I'm going to wrap up this toy box and this series by showing you how to build the aerial combat sequence, which is one of my favorite parts of this toy box. Until then, I want to thank you for watching and remind you that I have logic diagrams on my blog that will help you build this battle on your own system, for those of you who want to do that. As always, the link is in the video description. You can also subscribe to my channel by clicking on my photo in the lower right corner. See you next time.